everyone, how you doing today? My name's Kirsty, aka Beth Bookish, and I'm throwing all rhyme, all reason, all rationality, sanity, whatever you want to call it. It's getting thrown out the window because I'm starting yet another vlog series. This time looking at whether or not I am bookishly compatible with my Booktube friends. This year is my 5th year on Booktube, and over those 5 years I have made lots of friends, and obviously I also now have a partner because of Booktube. I met my partner through Booktube. Thank you again, Meredith, for hosting those live sprints. And basically it was a little idea because obviously I know people do things like reading a certain person, like Booktubers' favourite books, reading like people's book of the years, like best book of the years, worst books and things like that. And I thought I want to do that, but I want to kind of do a different spin on it. So the first thing that I thought was like a sort of compatibility meter, because it was mainly with me and Ren. We have such different reading tastes. I was like, it's really, really funny because we go so well together. And with things like TV shows, we are very, very similar, but with reading, we are very, very different. And it just made me think, like, we're not bookishly compatible, which got me the idea for this series. I've messaged a group of friends and asked them to all send me between 5 and sort of 10 to 15 of their all-time favourite books or series. From that list, I am then looking for ones that are the most likely that I'm going to want to read, because there's no point in me reading a book that I know I'm not going to enjoy because that's going to skew the results. So I'm picking books that I am intrigued by, interested in, or either own or want to buy. And then it's basically between my TBR shelves, Libby, and my local library, trying to get hold of as many of them as possible. And then whichever the first 5 are that come to me, they're the ones that I'm going to read. And it's basically going to be a scale from 0 to 100. So and each book is going to represent 20%. So obviously, if I love all 5 books, that means we are 100% compatible and you are my bookish soulmate. Whereas if I enjoy 0 of the books, it was like, well, we're friendship compatible, but bookish, not so much. So it'd be a fun little thing to do. The first bookish compatibility reading person that we are looking at is Chelsea from Chelsea Chow. She and I have been friends for 3 years now. We both started our channels around about the same time, and we're very, very similar personality wise and vibes wise. We've gotten on really well, and so I thought, you know what, let's see. So I went through a collection of her videos that have things like, she's got her favourite contemporary reads, her favourite romance tropes, her favourite books with magic, things like that. And I picked out a whole bunch. There were a few that I already own, thankfully. She herself gifted me the Soulmate Equation by Christina for my birthday. I'm kind of scared for that one because I did not have a very good time with The Honeymooners by those authors, so I'm kind of scared of how I'm going to get on with it. But I have the Soulmate Equation. I have Role Playing, which I know she read, I think it was this year, and it's gone into like her immediate favourites. So those are the 2 that I own. I have been on Libby. I have placed holds on Stardust by Neil Gaiman, Where Dreams Descend by, I can't remember the author name, The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffith, Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna Maguire, and Well Matched by Jen DeLuca. And then they had Winter's Orbit ready to download straight away. So I have 4 books now. So on those ones that I've placed on hold, it's a case of whichever of those comes through first, that'll be the 5th book that I read for this project. But yeah, I'm really excited, and it's quite an array of books there, because I did say that my specifics were sort of fantasy, romance, things like that. And these all kind of fall into my favourite genres. We've got fantasy, we've got romance. I think Winter's Orbit might be more sci-fi, but I want to try a little bit more sci-fi. And yeah, I'm excited. So this is going to be a vlog where I read those 5 books and then determine at the end just how compatible we truly are. I didn't do a very good job of updating while I was listening to this, but I also don't think I really said what the book was. The first one that I read, Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. I am having a really horrible relationship with a lot of books lately where they start off so good and then bitterly disappoint. Because this one was no exception. There were elements I absolutely loved, and it had the makings to be an all-time favourite, I'm not gonna lie. It's a world that does talk a lot about gender, and it has a very set system for gender. So those who are male wear something wooden on their person, females wear tin, and anyone who's non-binary wears something glass, as a way that at a glance people can see what your gender is without having to ask. And I was like, that's a brilliant concept. I love that. However, I didn't mind that we were being told they were wearing this, but then we got another, like, it was re-explained to us about 30 times throughout the book. And it was like every single character, oh yeah, they were wearing this because they're non-binary, because that's what our system is. And it was like, okay, kind of getting annoyed. I also don't know if it was the audiobook or what, but another issue I had with the writing was this author knows one word for talking, and that is the word said. I learned very early on that you should never write he said, he said, he said, he said, because it's repetitive, it's monotonous, it's annoying as fuck. And when you're listening to it on the audiobook, it got to the point that I just sat there and I was just counting how many times the word said was said, instead of actually focusing on what was going on. And I was getting really frustrated. I'm not even going to try and lie. It was pissing me off. Also, the biggest problem I had, so I've realised I don't think I've actually talked about the plot. This is a plot where basically it's set in space with this universe where there's kind of like one empire that rules them all, and there is also a treaty that is put in place to ensure kind of harmony and peace between all of these planets and nations. And every 20 years they have an assessor come in who makes sure that everything's still in order. There's these items called remnants that honestly it wasn't really well explained what exactly they do, but these remnants, which are sort of crucial to power, they have to be submitted, any that have been found in the last 20 years. And it's basically all of these systems that are in place to keep everyone nice and happy. Now, the representative for the main place is a man who has just been killed. So the Emperor is like, oh shit, we've just lost. Like, we've got the Thean ambassador married to our ambassador who is now dead. What do we do? Okay, I will find the sort of easiest to marry off of my grandchildren and marry them together, just so we've got an ambassador and we can shut everybody up and whatever, let's move on. So in walks Kiem, who is basically described as a walking disaster. He's kind of given this impression that he's a playboy. He's just very much this guy who he's about parties and socializing and getting into trouble with the media than he is politics and education and science and things like that. Whereas the Thean ambassador, Jinan, who is currently grieving the fact that his husband of 5 years has been killed, and they're now thrust together. They meet, they've got 10 minutes to get to know each other, and then they're married. Now, I will say their relationship was absolutely stunning. I loved each of them as individual characters. I loved it when they finally got their shit together. They were power couple 101, absolutely in love. But we spent 60% of this book in a constant miscommunication. And if you know anything about me, it is one of the biggest rage-inducing things that you can do in a book, especially when it's the most pathetic kind of miscommunication, when all that was needed was for one of them to speak their thoughts out loud at any point. And it's not like it was one of those books where you might only get one chance and they missed it. There were several chances for one of them to say something, and the doubts and fears that they had about each other and themselves were just so whiny and childish. And by the time one of them said something, I just went, thank fuck! And I actually shouted because I was getting so mad. Because like I said, I was loving these characters. I was loving the system. I was loving the politics, weirdly, which I don't normally. And I was really, really loving it, but I was getting so annoyed at the fact that I could see how perfect these two were for each other. It was pathetic, and there was no need for it. Genuinely, the book would have been so, so much better if maybe 1 or 2 chapters of this kind of awkward inner dialogue, but then one of them to have said something around about the 20% mark or the 25% mark, and them have gotten together then and spent the entire remainder of the book building on that. Instead, we had them together for less than like 5-10 minutes of the audiobook before all of a sudden they were separated, and it was like, I'm going to tear down the world to get back to you. And I was like, well, I would have wanted more of that build up to that point than just, oh, boom, everything's now happening, you know? So I ended up giving this one a 3.5 stars. I will say the narrator was fantastic, and I will actively be seeking out other stuff that he does because I loved him. I can see why Chelsea liked it, and I can see why it was a favourite of hers. I think with the writing, that was just me and my preference for reading and as a writer. But the important thing, do I count this book towards our compatibility meter? I'm going to say yes, but I don't feel like it's a complete absolute. I'm going to say it's sort of only halfway there. So like I said, for each of these books, they're worth 20% of the scale. So I'm going to say that this one is going to be worth 10%. Like, there were elements in it that I really loved. Like, I see that we definitely loved some of the same things, but there were parts that she really loved that I really didn't. And so, as I said, I'm only going to give this one a 50% mark, so it gets 10% in the overall rating. Soulmate Equasion, I am 30 pages in, and something I've already picked up. These authors really like writing their female characters to jump to the smallest conclusions. Because in The Unhoneymooners, Olive had the opinion of what's-his-face based off of one tiny little interaction that she read far too much into, decided that he hated her and was shaming her, and based her entire personality and her entire animosity towards him on this one tiny little thing that was complete horse crap. And in this, she's just overheard the guy that, you know, has introduced, like, the guy that runs the matchmaking service. She's just overheard him talking to someone else. You know, she's listening in on his conversation. She overheard him say vaguely, is like, an opportunity to prove that there's someone out there for everyone. The other man asked, ugly? No, not ugly, entirely average. And she's just like reeled back like, oh, I'm so offended. And I guarantee now she's going to be completely, like, she's already decided he's an ass for various reasons anyway. And I can guarantee the friction in this story is going to be her deciding that based off that one thing that he was talking about her and saying that she's at average, and she's now going to make it a thing that she now dislikes him for it, and that's going to be what their chemistry is that her realising that, oh, maybe he wasn't talking about her. So I'm already kind of like, I know how this is going down. I really hope I'm going to be surprised. But I'm also kind of like, wow, these authors really like to write female characters that are just judgmental as shit and jump to conclusions at the drop of a hat, don't they? But I'm hoping to be proved wrong, because I really want to like this one, especially as it was a present and it's one of Chelsea's favourites. Obviously, that's the whole point of this video. I'm just gonna keep going and see what happens. I finished the Soulmate Equation. Mixed feelings. It started off so good, and I was like, absolutely. And I still think it was good, and it was good. It was fine. I did have a few issues that when I did a very quick Google search on like Reddit, people seemed to agree. Like, one of the things that did make me laugh, it said he wanted to eat her like beef Wellington in this dress, and I have the opposite of aphantasia, where you can't visualise anything, in that I visualise everything in sort of like, really, Ginty? People do not need to see your butt. So I have like the opposite of aphantasia, so I see things in like hyper 4D ultra HD. So my brain immediately was picturing like down there as beef Wellington and I was just like, ooh. It was not a pleasant reading experience on that particular visual imagery. However, it was pretty good for the most part, but I don't even care if it's a spoiler, to be honest, because it's pretty much given. If you're reading a romance, 99% of the time there's a third act breakup. Do you want to know when the third act breakup came into this book? Here. All of this, and this is where the third act drama / breakup / whatever happened. On page 314 out of 360. When does the story itself finish? Of 355. That is 40 pages. And I'm not even kidding you, by I think it was 320, they were back. It was resolved. If you're going to include a breakup, it has to actually have a bit of an impact rather than it just being 10 pages and done. What weak story writing, and the ending of this was so poor. A very throwaway comment about something at the end that it was like, you made such a big deal out of that and now you're just going to do a little throwaway comment and not actually tell us. The breakup was complete, or certainly like the drama that pulled them apart and made you go, will they, won't they? Totally unnecessary. It would have worked so much better if they'd have just stayed as a couple and worked through it together. That would have had a much better storyline, but no. We have to include drama. We can't not include it. But I will say Fizz is one of my favourite characters. She was just so... I love sassy, like, bold side characters who... Because, let's be honest, Jess, wet blanket, not really a... I don't see what everyone's so fascinated about her with. But the one thing I will say, we had actual moments where she was doing calculations and talking with the proper lingo and talking statistics and things like that. And you could tell this was a woman who knows her stuff. And we saw it actively being brought in. And it was because of her knowledge that she was able to understand the data. That is good STEM representation. You're actually showing us. You're not just telling us she works in STEM, you are showing us and making us believe it. That is good STEM rep. So yeah, good side characters, 2 love interests who kind of bored me because it was like, I don't really see the... Well, I saw the appeal for him. He was a pretty decent guy, despite a couple of minor niggles. But yeah, Jess herself, I felt, was a little bit bland and boring, and everyone was going on about how beautiful she is and how gorgeous she is, and I'm like, that's pretty much the only personality trait that anyone's really mentioned about this, is she's a good mum and she's beautiful. Like, we didn't really see much else about her that really made me go, yes, I can see why everyone loves her. So yeah, I had things I did and things I didn't like. Overall though, it was pretty decent. I had a good time. It was very quick to read. I struggled for a little bit, but then I literally read like this much in all of yesterday. So yeah, I think this one, I haven't run it through Corpile, but it's going to be a 3 or a 3.5. Obviously, Editing Kirsty will put it up here, but it's not going to be in the 4s. But it's definitely not in the 2s. So I can finally say I have a straight up romance that's finally in the 3 stars, because me and romance this year have not gotten on. It's been mostly 2s and 2 stars and DNFs. So at least now we're finally creeping up and we're now in the 3s. I think if I wasn't being so critical, I probably would have given it a 4 and it would have been a great one. But obviously I've had issues with the writing from this author before, and it was showing here, like, they still have way too many weird, like, every single character, well, not every single, but most of the major characters we were introduced to had to be compared to a celebrity of some kind. And so I get that they're doing it to help you with the visualization, but it's also not helpful, and it kind of restricts me being able to come up with my own idea of these characters. So that was a bit off-putting. At least there were no sort of cultural references that were weird and wonderful, which was great. It just felt appropriate. But yeah, it's not my favourite, it's not my least favourite, but there were definite flaws. And also, if you know this and you know the end, you'll understand my hesitation and why I'm a bit doubtful about him at the end and the way he grovelled and came back, because I'm like, would you have if it had have gone a different way? Like, I feel like me and Chelsea are kind of middling. Like, they're some of her favourite books, and for me they're kind of just like, yeah, they're okay. There's elements in there that I love, but the execution hasn't been great for me personally. But like I said, 3 to 3.5, I haven't yet decided. And in terms of our scale and compatibility meter, so I'm going to give this one a good 10%. So we're going to go into up another box. So we're getting there. We might end up middling at the end. We might have a couple of good ones. But yeah, that's that one done, and on to the next.
You want to know what's really annoying? Is when you're playing Libby Chicken and Libby wins. I was listening to Where Dreams Descend by Janella Angelis, and yeah, I had 5 hours left of the audio and only 3 hours before it had to go back, and I was like, oops. So yeah, I let it go, and I am about 70% through it. But what I will say at this point, I'm really liking the atmosphere of this. I especially like when during the rounds of the magic and with Kalia, the way she is weaving the magic, I feel like I'm there. I feel very atmospheric. I feel very like, oh, this is good. I'm really liking Aros. He is by far my favourite character in this. DeMarco's great, but I don't know. I'm listening to the audiobook as well, and it's not my favourite. Her narration is okay, but Aros, I feel like he's meant to be sort of 16, 17, but the voice and the way he speaks sounds like he's 12, which is a bit not such a fan of. And also there's a second narrator, there's a male narrator, and he comes into it so rarely. The first time he came in, it had been like 2 or 3 hours since he'd last been in, and then all of a sudden this male voice started speaking, and I was like, wow. So it's kind of showing that there's a bit of an imbalance with the world build, with the writing. I feel like the POV should have been a bit more balanced between the two characters, or had, as well as having Jack and Kalia, I wish she'd written it as like a 3 POV, so we had the POV from DeMarco as well, and then on the audio we could have had a lot more balance between the voice actors, because it is quite jarring when all of a sudden there's this deep male voice when you've had 2 hours of a really soft female. But I am enjoying it. I'm liking the supporting cast, but I just feel like the world building is very lax and quite non-existent, but we need more world building to really understand the context of what's going on. Like, we understand that the place that they're in is a place that's got ice around it, but no one's actually explained why or how, and it just feels very disjointed with the world building. And I don't know, it just feels like so far there's a lot of stuff going on, but nothing's really happened. Which I'm noticing seems to be a running theme in the books that I've picked up for this vlog. But I now need to put The Loan on again and try and get it back. Hi! So I have now finished Where Dreams Descend, and the final verdict is 3.5. It's so close to a 4-star that I nearly bumped it up, but I decided not to, because the world building didn't really get much better. It felt like we were getting tidbits of things without full explanations. And even though I know there's a sequel, I had a quick look on Goodreads, and it seems like the general consensus of the sequel is that none of the questions we have in the first book are answered, and the rating is lower on the sequel is a lower rating on average than the first book, and you know, that's not a very common occurrence and usually doesn't bode well. And when I read the blurb for it, I was like, I don't really want to continue this. It was fine. The best thing I liked actually was the very, very end. We had one, like the very last bit of the book finally switched to DeMarco's perspective, and I genuinely stand by what I said before. Like, they should have had a three-way perspective. A, so that the audiobook was way more balanced between the male and female voice actors, but also so we got that kind of balance in the story, because I feel like DeMarco would have brought more. But yeah, I just feel like the world building, we know that there are the different families and what they're about, but we don't really know why they're no longer around. We don't know what happened to them. We still don't really know why this world is encased in ice and why it's like, how did that come about? I feel like to do with the shadow and the magic within the mirrors, I feel like there was so much potential there. I thought something was going to happen with that, and until like something does happen, but not in the way that I thought, and I feel like the second book isn't going to bring much justice to it. And I don't know, I just felt very underwhelmed. But then there were moments in the book where it was so captivating. Like I said, anytime there was a performance going on, I was enraptured. DeMarco and Kalia, their tension and their build-up was so good. And like towards the end of the book when they're working together and they have a scene where they're like dancing together, and it was just absolutely magical. It was palpable. And so I definitely rated this one very high on the atmosphere and the writing for that kind of thing. But the actual plot was kind of boring and predictable. We still don't, like, the magicians are disappearing. Where are they? What have they done? Where have they gone? Apparently just almost nothing gets wrapped up from the first book. And when there was action, it was one of those where it felt very rushed and just kind of like thrown in. So it's definitely one of those books where I think I just have a thing for circus books, because this one started off really strong. I was really liking the dark, sort of magic-y, mysterious like build up of the first few chapters, but then it kind of fell a bit flat. Aros, I will say, was by far the best character. I loved him. He just added such a cheek to the story. I do kind of wish we had more though from the different magicians, because I know they're her competition, but it kind of felt like Kalia, you know, she was so above and beyond every other person that was there that they were just insignificant. They should have had at least one other magician there that was more impressive or that had a lasting impression. I didn't get that kind of wow factor that I would have got had there been a bit more from the other competitors. So it was good, it was quite atmospheric, and it was well written. I would definitely pick something up by this author again. But because it has ended up on a 3.5 and is so close to being a 4-star, I am going to count this for 2 steps. So that means that on our graph, we're now on an ember is beginning to spark. You know, we're starting to feel a bit of love there. We're almost halfway there, but we are out over halfway on the book. So let's hope that the last 2 are going to be absolute bangers. I haven't started it yet, but I do still have Role Playing by Cathy Yardley, I believe, to get to on my Kindle. But those should hopefully not take me too long, and I should be getting to very soon. But yeah, we're almost there. 3 out of 5 done, and we are currently on 40% completion. So let's see how compatible we are with the next read. I have been reading Role Playing by Cathy Yardley, and I figured I need to do an update because I read 55% of this book in not even an hour and a half. So at the rate I'm reading it, it's going to be done before I can do an update. So I figured it's time to come on here and give a quick update. Role Playing is a romance. I've been struggling for the past week with my head to the point 2 nights ago I nearly took myself to hospital. It was so bad. But during all that, because I couldn't dance, I couldn't paint, I couldn't edit, I couldn't film, I couldn't make candles, Even watching TV was hurting too much. So I was like, I need to do something. I can't just lie here like a vegetable all day. I picked up my Kindle and I remembered that role playing was on there and that it's also on my list for this vlog. And I was like, okay, let's give it a go. It's so good. Oh my God. Not only is it amazing to see older sort of nerds represented, I'm loving that it challenges attitudes towards video gaming and how, you know, it's not just a thing that, like, for some of us who struggle with in-person socialization, video games can be a lifeline. It's nice to see that that was actually talked about. I also absolutely love the sexual representation in this. Basically, he's got a deal with his mum that if he can get a date to this upcoming family wedding, she will sort her medical stuff out. And the reason she wants him to have a date is because his brother's wife is his ex. Whole lot of mess, a whole lot of drama. But the family are still kind of stuck on it. And it's almost like, oh, poor Aidan never moved on. He has moved on. It's just because he's not had another girlfriend, everyone assumes that he's still absolutely devastated by this breakup. He said it does still occasionally smart and occasionally sting, but nowhere near as bad as it does that people seem to think that he has to have a relationship to prove that he's moved on. So his mum also on this kind of bandwagon of, you know, it's been 20 years, you should get another girlfriend, is like, right, you get a date for this, I will do this, and kind of blackmails him and not really blackmails, kind of guilt trips him into it. So he's now at that point where he's become friends with Maggie, he's starting to get attracted to her, and has now got to the point where he wants to ask her to the wedding. She's at the point where she's developed this friendship with him. It was so funny where the whole time at the start of the relationship, while it was just online, he thought she was 80 because it was one of his mum's friends that recommended adding her to the group. And she thought he was like 20, 21. And it was just so funny when they first meet in person and they realise that they're actually only 2 years apart. She's 48, he's 50, and they were like, oh, shit. I was sort of sat there laughing. But yeah, I am absolutely speeding through this. I reckon I will be done within like the next 24 hours. I'm going to sign off this. I'm going to log off my computer, head to bed, and I'm just going to read because I've got some other bits that I need to get read as well. And I've got a funny feeling this one's going to end up being a 4.5 or a 5-star as long as it stays as it is right now and doesn't do any sort of stupid shit in the final in the final half. I was correct, and we have a 5-star. I didn't go to bed as early as I was hoping last night, so I didn't actually start reading until like 11:45, but by 1:30 I was done. Oh my God. I just loved this book. It was so good. I also liked how it wasn't afraid to kind of almost mock itself, because there was one scene where there's loads of drama going on Aidan's side, and then Maggie's ex turns up and he's like, well, of course he's gonna turn up, because why wouldn't he? I was just like, at least it kind of acknowledged that, and I really liked how it approached that. But oh my God, it was so good. The second half did not let me down. And the wedding scene, I was screaming. If you've read it, you know. Oh my God, it was so good. And yeah, I loved the friends to lovers dynamic. I find that quite often with romance, one of the things I don't like is a lot of stuff is more heavily aimed towards one character. So for example, you'll get like loads and loads of stuff about the female love interest and barely anything beyond he's a man from the male, or the other way around, or there's just sort of like an imbalance of like POV. And when I read a relationship, I want to get all sort of equal from both sides, understanding who they are, what they're doing. And I did with this one. I felt it was really equally divided between the two characters. I loved how we got sort of both of them addressing issues that they had. They helped each other through their shit. There was I will say this, and it's not a spoiler, certainly I feel like I want to know when I go into books. There is no third act breakup in this. Please, authors, do more books like this. I'm not saying there was no conflict, but I will say there was no sort of super dramatic out of nowhere breakup that made no sense and didn't seem realistic, that was resolved within 3 pages. None of that. And it was so good. So yeah, 5 stars, absolutely. And I can't not give it 2 spaces on the compatibility chart. So we are heading there. We are getting there. We are heading towards the final, and we are now on the final book. Don't yet know what that is, because a couple of books I did request through Libby. There's been enough time that I felt bad holding them for so long, so I sent them back and placed a hold. And basically, whichever of those 3 is the first one to come through will be the one that I read, and then we can wrap this up and go on to our next person and find out just exactly how compatible Chelsea and I are as bookish readers. Clever me remembered that... Oh, I've got my glasses up. I put my glasses like this because I get really horrible, painful indents in the back of my head, and so I put them up to relieve that pressure. There we go. Now they're sat properly, and now my ears hurt. Anyway, I suddenly had the thought because I was checking on my hold, and it was basically saying that everything was sort of 8 to 15 weeks wait, and I was like, crap, I don't want to wait that long. So then, clever me remembered that Spotify also does 15 hours. You can read 15 hours of audiobook a month. And I typed in Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna Maguire. And there it was. That was great timing, Discord. And there it was. So it's only 4 hours and 44 minutes long, which I, at 1.5 speed, so should be about 4 hours, I think, roughly, give or take, if I work that out correctly. Should be about somewhere between 3 hours and 45 minutes and 4 hours. Which for an evening where it's now only 6:30 at night is perfect, because I can just play my video games, listen to this, and try and be in bed before 11. But I've got a funny feeling I'm not going to be checking in with this one. You're just going to get, once it's finished, I'll give you the full review. So let's go read, and I'll check in with you hopefully in about 4 hours. It's now 10 to midnight, and I just finished it. I really liked it. It was so short, so sweet, and I was worried that there wouldn't be enough fleshing out of things. But it was so good. It was so well written. The writing was beautiful. The prose was amazing. Even though we were only there it's not even 200 pages, I felt we really got a good understanding of every single character. I fully understood what was going on. The first chapter I was a little bit lost, but I think that's more because I was also playing a video game at the same time. So I paused my game for the first chapter, and then I was fine after that. Oh my god, I loved all the characters. I loved how diverse the sort of LGBT rep was. There was a lot of atmosphere written in, there was a lot of dynamic, and it was quite shocking. I saw one person on Goodreads that was reviewed saying that they felt the gore and the description was a bit too much. And I'm like, as someone who is an avid watcher of Criminal Minds, I felt it wasn't as bad as it could have been. I've seen worse on Criminal Minds, and that is a show for 15 up. I will disagree though that I looked online, I was like, what age rating is this? And apparently it's like 12 and up. And I'm like, I would never in a million years let a 12-year-old read it, because in the first chapter or the second chapter, Sumi's like, do you want to fuck him? I bet you want to fuck him. And I'm like, well, yeah. And like with the depictions of the gore, I'm like, yeah, that's not really appropriate for children, but I would say sort of 14, 15 up would be fine. But yeah, I had a great time. I loved the idea of all these children that have gone through portals and gone into other worlds, and they've now been returned to our world. And the idea that with some of them, it's a case of they can go back, they just need to find the door. With others, it's a case of they'll never be able to go back again. They were kicked out of that world, but now they can't assimilate back into our world. And then there's also different, they talk about there's different schools, like there's 2 in America. And there's their school where it's people who have been and want to remember and don't want to integrate back into the world. They want to go back to their world and remember what happened. And then there's the other school for those who, you know, they want to forget, they want to continue their lives, they want to get to a point where they can almost deny it ever happened or think of it as, oh, that was a really weird dream. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Purely because it was so short, and the ending, I was a little disappointed, but I do get that it sets up for future books. It's definitely 4.5, and I'm wondering if it should be a 5-star, because it was really good, but I just kind of, I don't know, I felt it was almost too short and too quick, and I wanted way more, and I could have happily stayed immersed in that world for another 200 pages. So I'm going to stick with 4.5. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. I was very pleasantly surprised. I wasn't sure, and it's now definitely made me interested to try out more of Shauna Maguire's work. And I will be continuing with this series, which I think is the first one in the, out of the 5, I think this is the first one that I've turned around and said that I will continue the series. Because Winter's Orbit, I just said I wasn't going to do the sequel. Where Dreams Descend, I'm not doing the sequel. Role-playing and Soulmate Equation were both standalones, and so this one I will continue. I'm going to definitely give this the full 20%, which means we are ending this vlog on 80% overall, which means that we are the bestest of besties. And I think it goes to show we are pretty bookishly compatible. Things I've definitely noticed, all of these books were very character driven, and it was the characters and relationships that formed the central point of the books. And I will definitely say that is something that we both share. I am very much a character driven, and Chelsea's also comes across very character driven. A lot of these books were very heavy on atmospheric writing and really building that suspense and that tension, and whatever emotion was being conveyed, it was really well conveyed. And settings were really well written. Like if something was supposed to be dark and creepy, they were. I will say though that I think where we really differ, and where maybe it's sort of what Chelsea prefers to me, I prefer a bit of a tighter plot and a less ambiguous plot, whereas I think Chelsea, as long as there's a really good character dynamic and as long as there's the really good writing, I think she doesn't mind if the plot isn't so tight and is a little bit more unsure and a little less logical. Whereas I definitely found through this that the books that I didn't enjoy as much as the others all had that element where I was questioning the logic and what people were doing. It was like, why are they doing that instead of that? Or why is it talking about this, and why is the world so unexplained? And I think, again, that is where we differ. I need things explaining to me really clearly for me to enjoy a book. Whereas I think with Chelsea, she can... I could be wrong. So Chelsea, tell me if I'm wrong. This is just my observations after reading the 5 books. And yeah, so it was a really fantastic experience. I'm really glad that I did this. I feel like I've gotten to know Chelsea's reading tastes a bit better. And yeah, so as I said, with the 5, my least, if I rank them in order of my least favourite to favourite, my least favourite was probably Soulmate Equasion. It was a little bit forgettable and the male lead was just a bit bland, and I heavily questioned his motivations at the very end of the book, and I was like, I'm on to you. I see what you're doing there. 4th place, we will have Winter's Orbit. Because, again, a little bit forgettable. I did like the characters. The voice actor was incredible. I didn't really like the murder mystery kind of element, and I also didn't like how the things that we needed to know were underexplained and the things we didn't need to know were constantly being repeated. 3rd place is Where Dreams Descend. Like I said, the magic was fantastic. The moments where she was performing were incredible. The supporting cast was great and the romance was great. Just the world building was very lackluster. Things were not explained very well, and the fact that the sequel has a lower rating than the first book is kind of throwing up some red flags, and I definitely feel that there was a lot of missed potential in the book regarding the shadows and the mirrors in particular. 2nd place is going to be Wayward Children. It was fantastic, it was great, it was dark, it was a bit spooky, but it was also whimsical, and it made me think of fairy tales, but it also had that kind of whodunit aspect that I'm finding that I'm actually enjoying that a lot more than I thought I would. And then also I really just loved the characters and the representation in there, and the writing in particular on this one was just so good. I absolutely loved the style of writing. And then obviously 1st place, role playing, the characters, the dynamics, the relationship, everything was perfection. I had a fantastic time. I read it in a day and I just loved every single thing about it and learned a little bit about myself in the process. So yeah, that is Bookishly. How bookishly compatible are we with Chelsea Zhao? Please go check out her channel. Please go support her. Please go follow her. I absolutely love her to bits, as you already know. And as it shows, we are also bookishly, I love her to bits as well. Even I don't know yet who is the next person on this series. I have 3 or 4 people who have all sent me things, but I do have books specifically, like on my physical books, I have books for 2 people. This is a series that is going to be sort of like a long ongoing process. It's not going to be every few weeks, it's going to be every few months that I do it, because I have so many other vlogs and projects coming up as well. Let me know below who you think might be next, as well as have you read any of these 5 books and which of these was your favourite, and how compatible do you think you might be with Chelsea? In the meantime, I hope you're all good. I hope you're staying safe. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to check out both my Patreon and my Etsy, because they both have new stuff coming up and I'm really excited to share it with you. And I will see you on the next video.